And welcome back to the next episode of the Unbiased Truth Podcast, Because Real Estate episode. We are down to two people today. We started with four. The first episode has three, and now we're down to two due to, things happening, life happenings, last minute things, and that's okay. So next month, hopefully we can get all four of us together for the first time. But today it's just myself and Christy Bacon, the team leader of the Move Virginia real estate team at Keller Williams. How you doing today?
Happy to be here, as always. Smile on my face.
That's right.
For now.
For now. So today, the purpose of this type of podcast or this series of podcasts is to talk about singular issues facing the real estate industry versus just bouncing around on different topics. And today, I think we'll just talk about the market itself.
Yeah.
And what does it mean? We have been shifting for a few months now, really started about July-ish, and now we're kind of full swing into this shift. Still a lot of unknown and whatnot. And as much as we've tried to talk about this, and it's been talked about a lot, I think we just want to address today just some of the pros and cons and how to navigate this. So, for example, some of the headlines and we'll dive into it is that some of the issue, I guess, is just the bad press, right?
Yeah.
All the clickbaits. And in the last 2 weeks, I've read articles that said there's predictions of a 20% collapse
I saw
next
that
year.
article.
And by collapse, they mean 20% reduction in price. Right?
I love how they use these strong words too,
collapse,
like these scary words.
Yeah, 20% collapse, which is, and you read the article, it's just 20% reduction in price. I get it. I guess that's a collapse, so to speak. But at 7% interest rate is 20% drop in price. Really?
Right.
Bad.
And here's the deal. We have been dealing with the past 2 years assessment values that have gone from the norm of 4 to 7% a year to double digits.
Yeah.
Between 12 and 20% in some areas. So when our assessed values are going up that high at that quickly, that's not sustainable.
No. So, and that's part of the issue with the slowdown is that you have really high interest rates and really high home prices. So buyers lost buying power because of the interest rates, and the houses just haven't matched where they should be.
Right.
So, is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Right. I feel like we're actually going to start to balance more as far as pricing comes. Mm-hmm. And I've told buyers this too, at some point it's going to be a balanced market, and sellers is too, before it turns into a buyer's market.
Sure.
So we're still very much in a seller's market.
Yeah. And then, from that article, I read an article and there's a couple conflicting ones that go from, they think interest rates will rise just a little bit more and then they'll start dropping. Yep. And some think by the end of the first quarter, we'll be back down into the 5s, maybe low 6s. Some say towards the middle to the end of next year.
Yep.
And then there's some that think it's going to peak double digits.
I haven't heard that as much. I love those pessimists.
It's
I can't wait to
now and then,
laugh at
it's
them.
It just peaks or pops in there.
Yeah.
And it's just.
I was at a mastermind today, and one of my lenders told me in March they're going to shoot up like a rocket and float down like a feather.
Yeah.
And the mastermind I was at today, a lender spoke, and he said he has predictions based on their trends and studies that they've done. It's by the end of the year, definitely 5s, could be 4s. By the end of by June, they think it could be in the 5s, low 5s.
Mm-hmm. And some of that is, because the Fed has said that they plan on raising rates twice, 2 more times, I think.
Yeah.
Because the inflation is still, the CPI was the CPI.
Yeah.
Index is still above 8.
Right.
I don't understand any of that stuff.
Neither do
I. It sounds like I do, but I don't.
I know you do. You can throw out good acronyms.
I know there's an argument to be made that the Fed rates aren't connected to real estate, but you can't deny that when their rates go up,
Absolutely.
real estate rates go up. So it's like an indirect, I
It
guess
is
is the best way to explain it. But there was also the reports from the Wall Street Journal stating that the Fed has leaked some information that the chair has been very stoic. But I guess the board itself is starting to question the tactics.
Okay.
And so they're starting to, so it was leaked basically, yes, they're still going to do a rate hike, but they're going to stop it at some point because they want to assess.
Right.
Because I think there's just a lot of fear and chatter amongst themselves now of like, how much damage are we going to cause by keep doing this?
Right.
Because inflation's not going down,
right.
but we keep jacking everything up,
right.
The rates up, and it's really affecting people. It's tough, and I don't know if there's an answer for what they're trying to do.
I know.
Because it's just a mess all the way around.
It is.
But like I said, just other headlines, coming out about could affect the housing market, and
right.
And I guess the housing rates are more affected or more tied to bonds and things like that, which they leak that so the bonds in the market would stabilize, basically. And
That's
if
interesting.
the bonds in the market stabilizes, then the interest rates for houses will start dropping, because there's more confidence in that.
Right.
So that's
and the statistics show that too. There was a good graphic that we saw at one of our trainings that said what happens after an inflation. So in the past, they showed in the graph where the rates had gone up due to the inflation, and then you start to see it come down at the peak of it. Yeah. So at when they've identified it as recession or use that word or not use that word,
right,
you'll see the rates start to drop down some. So we know that it's going to happen. I guess everyone's fear is how high will it go before it starts to drop?
Yeah. And so again, that's just the news these days.
Right.
And of course, everybody's a journalist now, right?
Everybody's a journalist and everybody's a predictor.
Yeah. So you get a lot of these clickbait headlines of doom and gloom because that's what people want to sell. And unfortunately, the average person, that's just what they don't know any better. Right. So that's what they go by, and it's a bad time to sell. And then you got on the other end of all this, the favorite sayings of, date the rate, marry the house, which, I get what you're saying, but that's very shallow.
It is until you're in the situation.
You are.
And I'm in the situation.
Yeah.
So I think that the trick to that is really having a strong team behind you who can keep you in check to know when it's time to get rid of that rate, to break up with that rate.
Absolutely.
So knowing that rates are going to come down, I think some of the things that they talked about today too is really interesting. A lot of lenders and builders even are offering these buy downs where they'll buy down your rate for you. So there's always a cost associated with that. And if the builder's taking it on, it's one thing, but there's always an option too. So the builder may buy it down or they may give you a closing cost credit. Well, if you're planning on being in that house, buy downs aren't even worth it unless you're planning on being there over 5 years. Yeah. So why not just refi? Because that's going to happen within 5 years.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess the point of that phrase is, for a lot of people, it's not just the rate. Again, it's that high price point. Like it's not just the 7%. Yes, I can refinance that. The core issue is first-time home buyers have lost buying power because they've priced out. So going back to the original headline of, if prices drop 20%, now even though rates are higher, you may be able to get more people into the market because they can buy the houses they want and then still refinance when the rates drop.
Yeah, I think I heard that number is like at 40% of our buyers next year will be first-time buyers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big number.
It is. So, and I know it's harder probably for you guys during transitions because you've got now, I can only imagine what it's like trying to price a home.
Pricing, yeah. I mean, I was looking at comps yesterday for a listing and I saw a house that had sold in that community in May. And then I saw one that closed in September. And the price per square foot was like $18 difference price per square foot. That's huge. Yeah. So it was someone who really priced it right in August, September, knowing that they wanted to get rid of it and close quickly. that's part of the reason why they priced it like that. Because I even called the realtor, like, is there a reason that you priced it so low? And she's like, no. She was just pricing it ahead of the market. I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
But like you said, back in May, that house sold for, I want to say, I think it was like $43,000 over list price.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, for a first time buyer, especially, that's not even possible. Like you can't, you're not looking $43,000 over your budget.
No,
So.
and that's a good segue into this point that made me think about it. You know, there's also a lot of conversation of, well, if home prices drop, right, then all those people aren't going to sell their homes, whatnot. Well, that's probably true, right? Because if you overpaid, or I say overpaid, but if you went, you know, $50,000 over list price, you know, and you know, one, are you really going to sell within a year or two?
Right.
You know, very, very small percentage.
Right. A small percentage.
And then let's be honest, the entire world didn't buy a house over the last 3 years.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know? Yes, the market was hot.
Very few did, which
Yeah.
is why we are in a seller's market.
Yeah. So yes, the market was hot, but that's still, when you're thinking about populations, that's still a very small percentage of the population that
Right.
still bought a home.
Right.
So there's still tons of people out there that didn't buy a home in the last 3 years. So they're not affected by, you know, well, I paid $100,000 over and now my house is 20% less, you know,
Right.
appraised value. So I'm underwater,
Right.
or whatever you want to call it. So I can't sell, but that's just a very small percentage of people.
It is a small, and most of the people that bought because they were either buying like their forever home or a home that they really, really wanted and have no intentions of leaving anytime soon.
Yeah.
So those people got a great interest rate,
Yep.
super amazing interest rate, and they're just going to have to sit and ride out another cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, hopefully the cycle isn't that long of a cycle,
Right.
but I listened to another podcast from a home inspector and he made the comment and that for home inspectors, the transition period is typically the hardest. You know, whether it's a buyer's market or seller's market, once we settle in, home inspectors are typically fine, right?
Okay,
It's just
that
that
makes sense.
transition, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think you go back to the last 3 years, 2 years, 3 years of a seller's market, we were still busy, right? Even though there was a lot of waived inspections, we were still pretty busy. Once we get through a transition and back to a buyer's market or even a neutral market, yeah, maybe less people, but everybody gets a home inspection.
Right.
So it's just
So that's the
getting
difference.
through
Yeah.
this cliff of interest rates going from 3% to 7% and get through that transition to a new normal, right? Of whatever that looks like.
Right.
People start feeling comfortable again, jumping back in, and home inspectors are fine. But I feel like that realtors may be struggle a little bit depending on where you are, you know. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we've just really talked about being more skills based and buckling down on who you're in business with and connections with. Really look at your database and think about who are those clients, where was your business from? You have to source your business every year, and who are your top 5 that you're getting? Where are your sources for business? So you've got realtor resources, allied resources, which your vendors, your sphere of influence. And so then really being minute and looking at, if it's your sphere of influence, who in your sphere of influence? Oh, this one person gave me 3 referrals last year. So I'm going to be like loving on that person.
That's right.
Super intentional for the next year, just to be like, you are a huge value to my business. So that's one thing we're really focusing on. And then you have to really be the expert. So whether you're talking about it or not in front of people, like you're sharing social media posts and content that's related to knowing the market, because I think we can like make our people like not pay attention to the media if we're louder than them.
Correct.
So if what we're saying makes sense and we're louder, I think that they'll focus on what we're saying and not what the media is saying.
And I think the make sense part is very important.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of posts and I'm like, why would you even post that? You know, like you should not post that at all. Like, I don't think that's saying what you think it says.
That's
you
true.
know? That's feeding into, we're going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Or very, you know, like you post a bunch of numbers and say, call me. Well, what does that even mean?
Right.
Like, you know, I saw one, I think yesterday, and it was a graph, and it really had no like reading it. Like I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it
I
was
think you lose people too.
yeah. So you really got to be able to explain it,
Right.
and that's either through the videos with the graphs or just actual explainers, you know,
Yep.
typing it out, whatnot. So yeah, I think the content's important.
Yeah.
But you really got to make sure you know what you're
Talking about.
yeah, because just
Absolutely.
posting a graph you found on the interwebs, and saying, "See, it's okay." Well, I don't know what that means, you know.
And this is from Texas,
That's
where
right.
it doesn't mean anything to
That's
Virginia,
right.
but
That's
okay.
right, and you get a lot of that is people posting from like the national statistics and stuff like that, and
Right.
and
I mean, real estate is hyper local.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
really have to pay attention to what's going on around you. In fact, I look at the reports from Williamsburg and Richmond because even those two markets are
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
And I have to pay attention to what's happening there and really like diving into these reports come out once a month, around the 16th to the 18th, depending on your MLS. And those are like my Bible for that month.
Yeah.
I make a video on it every month and send it to my sphere.
Mhm.
And it's just about what's going on in the market.
Yeah, and then you look at, you know, like for us, we started just before COVID, right? A little bit
Mhm.
before COVID, you know. So COVID hit, questioned my life decisions for that month because it really
course.
just dropped off,
Right.
you know, and then just took off.
Right.
And so for those last 3 years, I've done nothing but invest heavily in marketing because it's, you know, I knew at some point this wasn't sustainable.
Right.
And when we did transition, I needed to build enough of a brand awareness that can carry me because I haven't been around for 15
Right.
years or 25 years like some of the other companies have that's, you know, yeah, we'll be okay.
Right.
You know, and we're still for the most part somewhat unknown to a lot of realtors, you know, because there's 8,000 realtors in Metro Richmond,
Right.
you know, so you know, we got however many realtors in our database that we send out stuff to. But, you know, at Realtor Fest, it was still, hey, I've never heard of you, you know?
Wow.
That's why I'm here, you know,
Wow.
so you can
Yeah.
hear me. So I spent, you know, we spent a lot of time and money really investing to get that brand awareness out to as many realtors as possible. And now with this transition, really trying or starting to pivot to do the things I really don't like to do, such as events, you know, networking events
Yeah.
and open, you know, doing like probably stop by and events, evening stuff too. You know, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna have an office open house. All right, cool, I'll be there. You know, I don't like talking to anybody, but I'll be there. So really having to get out there and start doing the network because that's just free stuff.
Mhm.
You know, versus some of the stuff that we've done in the leading up to this.
And it's about relationship too.
Yeah.
So that really helps in that. And this is a relationship based business. So, I mean, this is one of the only businesses that it really is like you get out there and you build a relationship with someone and they're going to trust you for
Mhm.
their next step.
Mhm.
So, and you can't be the secret agent. And for you, I think you spent the first part of your business, your career, not being that. You're not the secret company anymore. So
Right.
now people do know who you are
Yeah.
in most areas, in most markets. And then you dropping by isn't a stranger anymore.
Yeah.
Dropping by, bringing whatever, you know?
Yeah, and that's the hardest part for inspectors because they'll tell you, you know, when you're first brand new and like we'll stop by the offices and you don't get past the front door,
Right.
you know, and like, hey, I'm just going to drop this off and all just goes to the trash. You know, we'll
Right.
take your cookies, but all your other stuff's going to the trash, you know. So,
But it doesn't like that for you anymore, right?
for the most part, no.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to focus on some of those offices we haven't hit, especially the smaller ones. You know,
Yeah.
I got Courtney going over to dropping by, you know, especially in Williamsburg because we really want to start growing down in that
Mhm.
area. Dropping by offices and dropping off materials and stuff and tracking, you know, and that's
Yeah,
one of the
and
biggest
classes.
things. Yeah. Classes have been a huge help. We have typically gotten business out of almost every class we've done.
That's awesome.
And that just leads to more referrals, you
Mhm.
know, as word gets around. But it's really just been getting back to some of those basics of you know, visiting offices
Yep.
and
It's
getting
your
back
lead
out
gen
there.
time.
Yeah, yeah. But we also use a database, you know, just like
Uh-huh.
realtors do, CRM database, project boards, project management boards. So Courtney can track which offices she hit this month and drop stuff off. And she knows in 30 days or 45 days, she needs to stop by, refreshing whatever. And
That's good.
so we kind of keep track of that stuff.
We call those pop buys in realtor world.
Yes, pop buys. I refuse to use words like that. But that's just some of the stuff. And there's a lot of companies on both sides, real estate, realtors and home inspectors that just last 3 years, they haven't spent any time doing any of that.
They hadn't had to.
Yeah.
So that's what's very interesting also about a shift. And this probably affects you too. We'll see the amount of our agent count go down because you're going to find people say, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or it's not like it was. And I was never told how I need to build a business out of this. I was just, my phone was ringing and now the phone's not ringing anymore. And so now what do I do? And they don't know what to do. And so they jump ship. Or
they just go through 2 or 3 bad transitions because now it's negotiations and repairs and sellers not repairing.
Never had to do that before either.
And you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. This is very stressful. I'm always in a bad mood. I'm fighting with everybody and this just isn't for me.
Right. Trust me, we all have days like that.
Yes. So definitely interesting. I don't know. I think I'm hoping more for the end of the year down into the 5s versus the spring, you know, but either way, I think as much of a struggle it may be, it'll be good for the industries.
I do.
Both.
I do think so.
I mean, there really has, someone posted in a inspector group, brand new inspector trying to get started, and, and one guy was like, hey, not the best time. And the comment was basically inspectors have doubled in the last couple of years because of the amount of work and whatnot. So now it's the cleaning out period.
Right. Real estate's the same way.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting too, like what happens when the agents who are like throwing up the white flag saying either I'm out or I need help, you'll see a shift from there too, because some of those people have to stay in the business. So they'll join teams or they'll switch brokerages, hoping that that's going to be the solution to whatever they're hoping for to increase their business. And another thing is that when you're setting your goals, like we've been able to track the past 2 or 3 years, this great growth in our business. But when I'm setting my goals for this year, like, how do I look at it? Like, do I just try to maintain? Or do I have so what I've done is I've made a goal and then a stretch goal. Just because my goal isn't going to be crazy this year. It's going to be, let's try to maintain and be right where we're at. I know what I need to make to be able to pay my bills and be able to pay my admin and all that. But after that is the profit that will determine, I have a number that I have to make. And then what I do after that will just then give me all my money that I can give away, investment property, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that's a great point because if, people like, hey, how are you doing? Well, not as busy as last October.
Right.
But last October was kind of an anomaly.
Right.
So that doesn't mean we're not doing good. It just means that year over year growth, it's going to drop. And it's going to drop for everybody, because you can't sustain the last 2 or 3 years. It was unsustainable. So you really got to start looking back if you have the ability to pre-COVID. And what were your numbers?
Right.
So
exactly.
One of the things that I think that I'll sit down and do, and I did it for this year, was tiered goals. So you got, where do I need to be? Where do I want to be?
Right.
So and that's kind of what shifted this year. Mid-year is like, we're not going to hit where I really want to be, but that's okay. I'm still going to hit the goals that we have to hit.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be able to set those goals and know where you want to be. But, like you were talking before this, before we started, how many people raised their hand in your class of didn't know how much they made.
Yeah. That's crazy to me.
So it's going to be very difficult if you don't know how much you made to be able to set goals on how much you need.
Right. Right.
So,
and this is the time of year to do it. I mean, we call it Goaltober for a reason. So we sit down and we look at the 4 models, our lead gen model, our organization model, our budget model, our economic model, and where we were versus where we need to be this year.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to set some crazy goal that's not going to be attainable.
Right.
to work through a shift, I was licensed in 2008. So
Yeah.
I know what a shift looks like, and I know what like a downward spiral looks like. And I don't think we're going to be there. I don't think we will at all. But if you look at the trend, when there's a shift in the market, you're going to see numbers drop.
Mm-hmm.
So that means units, transactions, sales. I mean, we were down 20% in sales just in September.
Yeah.
So we know it's happening. It's just sales also means listings. So if we're not getting the listings, we're not getting the sales.
Yeah.
So that the numbers are just going to go down. And the job for us is to clarify to people, like, not to be scared through this, and then just to set the expectation too.
Yeah. And mentioning 2008, how it's not going to be like that. I saw a chart the other day, week or two ago. And the point of the chart was actually that the drop off this time has been greater than it was in 2008 in terms of sales and volume. But the benefit was that we started at such a high point this time.
Right.
So instead of starting even and going negative, we were very much positive and dropped to even. So it doesn't hurt as bad.
Right.
You know, so
in both price point and rates.
Yeah.
So we had two things going for us that have kept us super high, and our rates being so low and our sales prices going up.
And that's not saying, that's just strictly volume.
Right.
That's just strictly, that's nothing about bubbles and all that other stuff.
Right.
That's just strictly, foreclosures or anything like that. That's just strictly volume of homes sold and homes listed, things like that. So the drop off appeared to be, if, I didn't, go too deep into it, but the drop off, if the chart was accurate, is greater than 2008, but we just started at a much higher place.
Right. That makes sense.
So the market is still strong, even though it's a worse drop off than it was before, just because we started at a much higher place.
Yeah.
So, so I guess we're just not feeling it.
Right.
I mean, I know there's a lot of people stressed about it for sure.
Right.
But,
and I think part of it is, I think there's a couple of things that played into when do you start to be fearful about it, because we typically slow down in August anyways, because of everybody going back to school. And we also know that it's going to slow down again in November. And into January and February. So because of that, some of this is due to just the cycle of the market,
Well, and not just that. This is the first time in 3 years without COVID restrictions anywhere.
Right.
So how many people are out during the October weekends, doing festivals and pumpkin patches and stuff like that they just haven't been able to do the last couple of years, and really enjoy.
And July, August with vacations overseas and traveling abroad, like those are all things that are happening.
And I could see that in our scheduling, when a lot of the fall festivals were going on, like, because that week was a little bit lighter. And then, towards the end of the month, now we're getting heavier again, so I think there's just a lot of factors to really make it difficult to really gauge where we are.
Right.
So yeah.
Although we've been given the warning, like, for 3 years now.
Absolutely.
that it's coming. The shift is coming.
The thing is, if you looked at it and you just ignored it and you thought this was forever, and that's what made me laugh when it started happening and people started panicking, it's like,
you knew,
like,
you knew
and
this
that's
was
what
coming.
made me laugh with all the articles of, the rates have doubled this year. Well, yeah, they went from 3 to 6.
Right.
Yes, you are correct. They doubled, right? But it wasn't like 10 to 20 doubling.
Right.
It was 3 to 6. Like,
Right.
why are we making such a huge deal when we knew this was going to happen at some point? Especially with not political, just facts, but bad policies, free money,
Right.
inflation, which causes all the inflation. We can talk about the job market, and read an article about the California. I think there's legislation in getting through, or at least going through the motions of $22 an hour minimum wage. And Chipotle basically said, raise your prices or we're out. There's your two options. So you have a lot of, maybe to a lesser extent, but that also drives inflation. Right. All these, quietly quitting and ghostings and the way that people aren't working until McDonald's is paying $20 an hour. So it's just a cycle of issues causing inflation, not just bad policies, but we're also doing it to ourselves. And you look at all that stuff, and it's like it was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, that just wasn't lasting forever. But I think the good news is that, like I said, unlike 2008 lasted a while.
It did.
You know, that was.
I think I was like looking at it. It was like 10 to 12 years before we could really get out of that.
Yeah. To where this one, hopefully, you know, even worst case scenario, you know, it's still not, you know, when the rates start to drop again.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be. Yeah.
And if you look at, there's some good graphs out there, some data that showed like where we were rates wise at that point in 2008. And if you look at like evenly where we're at, it's right where we were then. Like if you look at a balanced market, we're still right in line with where that was.
Yeah.
So we saw some peaks and we saw some hikes and we're still right on track. So if we were to just not have the peaks and the hikes and the lower rates and the higher rates, and we would have just stayed where we're at, we're still right where we should be.
Yeah.
And I think, like, obviously there's people, I think we bought our first house, it was in the 7s for sure when we bought our first house. So there's people who have been around long enough to know that this isn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's the younger generations that are like freaking out, especially if they were looking at houses last year, because then they were experiencing that interest rate.
Yeah.
But they also didn't get a house last year.
Exactly.
For some reason or another. And it's probably because there was so much competition. Whereas now they won't have to pay that 10 to 20 over list price in this market. So there is definitely a good trade-off.
Yeah. So what's your biggest advice for people at this point?
As a realtor?
As a realtor, yeah.
So just really doubling down on your database, which also means your lead generation time. And for me, I'm a relationship person anyway, so connection is important to me.
Yeah.
I know my goal is I need one listing appointment and one buyer appointment a week. And if I'm not getting that, I need to have some sort of appointment set.
Right.
So if it's just have lunch with someone, I need to be in front of people. Yeah. I heard from my coach, she told me that, I think it was Gary Keller that said, you need to be in front of 40 to 50 people a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the bold class, I mean, you need to have 100 contacts a week. So if we're going to have to really double down on more lead gen time, like some people are saying, do it in the morning and do it in the afternoon. And lead gen looks so different for so many people. Yeah. So you have to find what works for you that doesn't, like, it has to be manageable so that you actually do it. Because if you're trying to set these goals and then create this lead gen time that you're like, I'd rather be on my phone than on the phone with somebody, then it's not going to work anyway. So you got to figure out what works for you. I've also figured out, I think it's just harder for me to connect with people on the phone during the day because I have people that work. Mm-hmm. So I have found that I'll post something about me and my personal life and my kids, and I get a lot more interaction on that than I would on my Monday market moment.
You know, and that's a great point because social media.
Yeah.
So many people, and it blows my mind that they don't ever change their strategy. And I am not a marketing genius. I'm not a marketing person. I don't have a marketing degree, any of that stuff. But I know of inspection companies that got 5 times as many followers as I have, and they get 0 engagement, and they don't ever change up what they're posting. To where, you know, I mean, we get some days where we get very little, but also get some days where we get a lot for a home inspection company. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah. I mean, we're not Chick-fil-A, but you know, for a home inspection company, we get a lot. And what people don't do is mix it up. You know, you got to put in that stuff that people want, you know, so they can learn. You know, they want the information, but they also want to see whether it's the family stuff. For us, it's just the funny defects, right? Right. That's what gets a lot of the traction. And the memes, you know, make memes and things like that. But they want to see that personal stuff. If all you're ever posting is, you know, just sold, just listed. Exactly. That just doesn't get any traction. Right. So you can have, and, you know, I read or listen to Gary Vee, who does marketing, right? That's his thing, and growing businesses. So through social media, and he says it's not about how many followers you have; it's about how much engagement you get. So if you have 1,000 followers but a ton of engagement, that's better than 20,000 followers and 0 engagement. Right. You know, so it's not. So that's what's important. So you really got to figure out what your audience is looking for and what gets their attention. And then you got to figure out the algorithms,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's ways to do that too. We just had our social media person tell me that most of my engagement comes around like 5:00.
Yeah.
So if you can like figure that out too, like that'll figure out, like I've had to revamp on how I do things because I post and ghost. And that's like a bad thing to do too. So I'm trying to get better about like when I see the little red dot, that means someone's probably engaged to something. So then I need to get back in there and say something. I had like Facebook is like the most passive aggressive thing to me in the world, but I know that it's important for a business. So that's the only reason that I keep it like
that's the only reason I have any social media is because of business.
It's totally.
I quit it all for a year. And it was the best year of my life.
Oh, I bet it was. So freeing.
Yeah, it so is.
Yeah, I've had a couple friends do that, or just like keep their family on and that's it. Yeah. And that's just so their family could see pictures of their kids and stuff like that. And I'm like, gosh, that would be so nice.
It would be. Yeah. Yeah. I typically post mine in the morning, first thing in the morning.
Okay.
That's when I get engagement. And Facebook's funny. I mean, and there's also something to be said about how often you post. Like, you know, some people are posting like every 3 minutes and Facebook doesn't like that. Your stuff gets buried.
Interesting.
There's a fine line between how much you post and how frequency, you know, if you're posting 3 times a day, sometimes that stuff doesn't they bury it.
Okay.
It's weird.
It is weird. I did read for a realtor, like it's good to do 5 to 7 posts a week and find which one you like are most comfortable with, or like where your audience would be the most engaging. So for me, I would think it'd be Facebook just because of how old I am and like my like crew is in that. Yeah. But because I do have like a good core group of buyers that are younger, I think I have to do Instagram as well. So
yes. Yeah. So we do LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and just started TikTok about a month ago.
Wow, that's brave.
Right. And my kids are mad because I got a TikTok account and they don't.
Good for you. Yeah, good for you.
Jordan's like, why can't I watch TikTok? Because you're 8. Well, that's not fair.
It's crazy that they know even what it is. It's crazy.
So, but again, it's just capturing different demographics, you know, because of that. Now, the downside of TikTok, and I'm told that there's a way to do this. I just don't care enough to do it, but TikTok is more widespread. So your followers are from everywhere versus like Facebook, you can really zero in on where you want
areas,
your areas and demographics to where TikTok is you're getting people from everywhere, but you're still getting a lot of exposure though.
Gotcha.
And whatnot. So yeah, you really gotta, you know, because Courtney being 21, whatnot, we get feedback from her, you know, Facebook's for old people, as she said.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know how to use it. I genuinely do not know how to use Facebook. Oh my
gosh, that's crazy.
It's sad, right? That's sad. So, but, you know, going back to what Gary Vee says, you know, when it comes to paid advertising, Facebook gets you your most bang for your buck.
I've heard that.
Because you can target your audience.
Yep.
You can target your locations to zip codes. And for the cost, you get a lot more engagement and views, like even more so than like Google. Right. Because Google is all the pay for clicks. And I've done it before. And if there's not a very competitive space in Google, then you can kind of figure it out, then you're okay. Right. But if your cost per click is $20 a click, and your product is $100,
right?
Well, you're losing a lot of money, because the space is very competitive, right?
Yeah.
And then we would get phone calls, you know, from looking for the codes office for Chesterfield, you know, because they search, you know, code inspector or whatever, and our ad would be top, and it always old people, you know, because they don't. You know, well, you were the first one. Yeah, we're doing home inspection. So now you're just wasting money on people that's not even looking for you. So that can be very costly if you don't know what you're doing there. Versus, like I said, Facebook, you spend $20,
right?
You can get in front of 5,000.
I love it. That is the good part about them.
Yeah. So even though it's for old people, there it is still for now the best bang for your buck when it comes to advertising.
Plus groups. I mean, I think, I don't know how it works for you guys, but for us, realtor referrals were 28% of our business this year.
Yeah.
So that for me is important to be a part of some of those groups and not just posting, hey, remember me, I'm a realtor from Richmond, Virginia. It's posting like content that maybe they would be useful for them.
Mhm.
Like just like you would a client, you want to provide value to them. That's
Right.
kind of what we're really focusing on this year is how can I provide value to you, whether it's an allied resource, whether it's a client, whether it's a vendor, whatever it is, how can I provide value to you? And there's this realtor that got up during Mega Camp and she talked about this like magical black book is what she called it. And you literally, this lady opened her book and it was like pages of business cards that she taped or glued into this book. And she said she goes through it every week and she figures out who she needs to make a phone call to that she can add value to their business, whether it's a jewel or a dry cleaner, whatever it is, because you just never know who your referral resource is going to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's kind of why, one of the things I want to focus on, because, part of our project board, we have a marketing strategy in there. Mm-hmm. And first quarter is continue what we're doing visiting offices, but really focusing on these smaller offices, that don't get the attention like Keller Williams does,
right?
Or Long and Foster does. These boutique brokerages that often get ignored by vendors, so stopping by and dropping stuff off and, things like that, bottom lunch, all that fun stuff. Because they may not have 200 agents, but they also don't get paid a lot of attention.
Right. And so if you're the only one going there and they have 8 agents and they're all using you, then that's better than 4 agents in an office of 200 that are being used and you're paying a lot more money to be in there or whatever.
I know. Always asking for money.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Yeah. You got any more of that money? No, I mean, that's just part of it, but, I've, off topic a little bit, I think some models have been very dependent on that.
And interesting.
I think a lot of people are going to start pulling back if they haven't already, just because of the market right now.
Yeah.
Like I can't, because I got hit up. I got hit up for $2,500 for a holiday party. And I was like, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't think I've spent $2,500 on anything,
right.
By itself to begin with, let alone last minute. And I hate saying no, but,
right.
Man, we're slowing down.
Well, that's part of your lead gen model too, is like in your budget, looking at, okay, where am I getting my most business from? And if I'm going to be pouring that much into that, like one area, like I better be getting a good return on that.
Yeah.
And if you're not, like, that's what we're going to have to really look at our budget this year for lead gen to what we're spending on lead gen, because are we really getting that return on the investment?
Exactly. And that's what I've started looking at is figuring out not only where to invest the money, but, alternative ways to spend that money as well to still get the most out of it, So,
I mean, let's be honest. Gary says, obviously the first place you need to cut are your personal expenses. And really, I mean, the only thing that we could cut would be like cable. I mean, we really don't like spend like crazy.
Right.
But then when you're looking at business expenses, I think the first category I look at is lead gen.
Yeah.
For sure. That's all your client appreciation events, all of the like pop buys, all of that stuff.
And it's hard because you talk to anybody in business, they say, don't ever cut marketing. Marketing should never be cut, and that's when, when it gets slow is when you're supposed to ramp up your marketing.
Right.
But it's hard. So that's where you got to start looking at alternative ways to still keep your marketing up.
Correct.
While cutting those costs, so.
And that's in person, face-to-face, networking.
Yeah. But this is also for us that, this is why we invested so heavily in this stuff, the podcasting and videos, because this stuff's paid for.
Yeah.
So now, yes, it was a heavy investment up front.
Right.
But now, I mean, how many people can we get in front of by just creating content that nobody else is creating? Right. So that's one way. And then, like I said, going to these office parties that we don't have to sponsor, we're just invited.
Right. So, that's great.
So those are good opportunities. And So being able to do some of that stuff, our classes that we do for free and whatnot. So, and then each time you should be either collecting business cards or
Right.
rosters,
Right.
if people are coming for classes. So you can put that all in our database and whatnot. But yeah, it's really hard because the first place you want to cut marketing. Like I ain't got no money for nobody.
Right.
Don't call me.
My gosh. And I, as a realtor, they call you like every day.
Yeah.
On one lead gen avenue after another.
Yeah.
Oh, pay for leads, pay for listings. We'll set up the appointment for you. I mean, you name it, it's out there. Yeah. And for a new agent, like that's the shiny object. When you were making money, like I bet there's a lot of people that got sucked into these yearly contracts that you're paying $500 to $1,000 a month to get these leads. That are they even worth it?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I get calls daily from realtors about money. Can you sponsor this? Can you sponsor that?
Do they? Man.
They do. They do. Some realtors think that we only work for them solely. So, that we don't get any other offices call us. But.
Gotcha. Good to know. Good to know.
But again, you got to focus on where you're getting the most investment. We spend a lot of time and money in Keller Williams because we get a great return from Keller Williams, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But, to have an office call us and say, hey, we're doing a holiday party. Can you spend $1,000 or $500? And you look it up like, I know one of you.
Right.
I've made $1,200 in inspections for you and you want $1,000 back.
Right.
So now I'm paying you money.
Right.
To be friends with you.
I made no money.
Yeah.
None.
Because by the time you pay for everything else, there's just, I'm literally paying you to be in your sphere. I didn't make any money at all from you. I've lost money. So,
yeah.
And there's a business aspect to that, and I think the frustrating part is sometimes that business aspect doesn't get picked up by people. When you say no, some people just get really mad. It's it's aggravating. Like, I thought we had a good relationship. I thought you was really going to come through. And it's like, I didn't know it was based on money.
Wow.
But it's, so you're always hesitant to say no because you don't want to damage the relationship because
that's tough.
It is. And we had somebody I was talking to last week. They turned down a sponsorship and the realtor told him like, hey, I thought our relationship meant more than you than this. And okay. I'm sorry. It's the end of the year.
Right.
You're wanting me to come off a lot of money out of randomly. Like we didn't ask, we didn't plan this for a year. It's just last minute. And you're like, I thought, as much business as I give you, I thought I can count on you. Well, they got bills to pay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell those marketers when they call, like, we plan our budget the year in advance. So all of our marketing dollars are already spent.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we've started to do.
Yeah.
Too, like, especially with this project management board that we started using, is actually being able to budget and plan, and with the understanding there's going to be a couple that pops up.
Right.
Because I got asked yesterday, I think, and by an agent, client appreciation, and it's an agent that I've worked with from the beginning. Absolutely, because you've given me more than enough business, so it's okay,
I get it.
So it's definitely tough, and I think some people are going to have some hard realities when like you say, you got to cut back on client appreciation events, and you may have to cut back on some office stuff, because some vendors just can't.
Right.
We're not all lenders, we don't have all that lender money to give. So, the cost to operate a business is a lot more expensive than what most people think.
Right. Oh my gosh. I cannot believe what our monthly bills are. I'm like, are you serious? We spend this much money a month?
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like, I don't understand. Like, I started figuring like, well, we did this many inspections. That's a lot of money. Where did it all go? So yeah, that's just part of the dynamics of the market shifting and the currently unknown, so it's just trying to find ways to be able to weather the storm and still keep that marketing up without going bankrupt, basically.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, any other thoughts?
No, we've covered a lot. There's
Yeah.
some good content. I mean, I think really people looking at what they spent last year you really need to be looking at your budget right now, this time of year. You really need to look at your numbers, know what you've done. And especially like you made a good point, go back before COVID, go back and look at like in 18 and 19, if you were in the business then, what you were doing that like is really more like realistic. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So that would really be something to go by off of like tracking where you think you could be projecting what you could do for your production for next year.
If you've been fortunate enough to be in business for 10 years, the theory should be take away your best year and your worst year to get your average.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
We do that in comps.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that way you get a better idea where you should be.
Yeah.
Because in this case, take away the last 3 years,
Right.
the last 2 years at least, because there are exceptions to the rule.
Right.
And so there wasn't sustainable. We knew it was sustainable. And here we are trying to figure out why it wasn't sustainable.
Right.
But I think people really got to zero in on their business,
Mhm.
and it's time to learn business.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
a little bit behind at this point, but you got to understand marketing.
Yeah.
You got to understand that this is a business.
Yeah.
Not, like I said,
And you're a business owner.
yeah. If you're just raising your hand because you don't know what you made last year, you're in for a rough few months.
Yeah.
Minimum few months. So
I was talking to some new agents yesterday in a mastermind, and we were talking about like where do you start if you've never done a P&L or a budget or you don't have any history to track off of. And I was lucky enough that I was not the breadwinner for my business, for my family. So I literally just took half of my commission check and put it aside.
Yeah.
30 obviously was going to go towards taxes and 20% was going to be towards business expenses. Whereas a solo agent, you don't have that many.
Right.
So you can like start pocketing that for rainy day
Yeah.
fund, for saving up for that first admin, whatever it's going to be. But if you could try to live, like I told people, like look at your budget for your personal expenses this year and figure out what you have to make to pay all your bills and really try to live according to that going into this next year.
Yeah. Solo agent's a good point. I think every other day right now I think about, man, I could just go back to being a single inspector, no overhead,
Oh, trust
no
me,
bills.
I know. I know.
Tell Courtney, here's your 2 weeks. And
Look at her face. What?
I mean, I keep you on, but we're working for meals with food at this point. So, you make really good money.
I know.
Just being by yourself.
Expenses, it's so much easier.
Yeah,
so much easier. But the other thing, I mean, according to like the model from the MREA, like that is like the hardest you'll work too. Like think about it. You're doing everything.
Because I was working 7 days a week.
Right.
So
there is definitely no, like that is not for me
There's
either.
no like Realtor Fest wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Because there's no planning.
You have no life if you're a solo agent and just doing everything. And plus you can't be good at everything. Courtney's better than you at a lot of things, I'm sure.
Easy.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Easy. You don't need to tell her that stuff. But, I mean, you're right. Because, we're just this past year, and this wasn't planned. And next year, I told Cindy we're not taking any vacations. But, in February, she did the family reunion.
Yep.
Then we went to Disney with her parents. And then we went to Pigeon Forge.
Beach. Oh, yeah.
For a week, the beach for a couple of days. I'm going to Nashville in a couple of weeks for a conference, and that doesn't happen. And then Jamaica.
And
I was going to say hello.
All the vacations I took.
Well, yeah.
But you couldn't do that as a solo.
You can't.
No.
You can't. You can't do it because you just have this fear of losing too much business.
Right.
So
someone's going to want a house when you walk away or when you go on vacation. I mean, it always happens anyways. You go out of town, and I don't know if this happens for you, but that's when I'm the most busy.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely. And then it's just, stuff like this. You just can't do this stuff.
Mm-mm.
You can't visit offices
right.
Unless
you're spinning. You're just spinning your wheels to try to keep up.
Yeah,
so.
There's no soccer games on Saturdays. There's
right.
no softball games.
Right. Exactly.
It's So as much stress free as from the business side as being by yourself is, financially.
Yeah.
it's a lot more stressful personally,
Right.
being by yourself.
You pay for it there for sure.
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter. You're going to pay for it regardless.
Right.
Pick your heart, as they say.
Right.
Well, awesome. Well, I think this was a good one.
It was.
I
Thank
think we
you.
covered a very good amount of topics about just, strategies and some of the challenges, shifting markets and things like that, and stayed mostly on that topic. So hopefully this was beneficial to anybody who needs it. But, I think the takeaways are, work on your business, work on your marketing.
This is the time of year
Don't
to do
cut
that.
your marketing.
Right.
Really learn your business, learn your skills.
Know your numbers.
And start projecting out.
Yeah.
Start planning. There's a lot of different headlines out there. So it's really easy to get bogged down in all that stuff. So you really got to take your time and figure out, plan for the worst case.
Right.
But plan for the best case, hope for the best case,
Right.
Best case is by the end of the year, we start dropping in rates.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
I'm going to say June. I need it to be more like June so we can go crazy second quarter.
I know. That's what sucked this past year because July, we had a pretty good dip. And it was that was, I don't think that was just interest rates. I think that was vacations and everything else because of COVID, right?
Right.
Lack of restriction. I'm like, really?
Can we just catch a break here?
Yeah. So, August and September was super busy. It bounced right back up. And October's been a pretty decent month. But, but in the moment, you're like, what's going on?
Right. Oh, yeah. Fear sets in immediately. Yeah. And the media wants that. That's their number one game is fear. Create fear in everybody.
So stay in front of your people. Make sure they
absolutely
are getting facts. Make sure you know what you're talking about.
Be the expert.
It's no more just playing the game. You actually got to understand the game.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
Hopefully next month we can get the other two back in here and have a full panel.
Absolutely.
And we'll figure out what we're talking about there.
Sounds good.
Thanks.